This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
I'm David Beckemeyer, and my show is Outrage Overload.
Hey, I'm Mike. Welcome to Podcast Diaries. These are the stories of podcasters who feel alone, just like you. So, David, how you doing today?
I am doing well. It's been a wild week, and I think we have it. That's probably not over yet, but yeah, I'm doing well.
Good. So, David, tell me about the show. What is the show?
So it's a show about outrage in society and kind of trying to lower the temperature. So I talk to scientists and researchers and authors and community leaders and things like that about sort of the science behind outrage and science behind outrage media and sort of some of this, the outrage industry, the people that profit off of all this, and then talk about a lot of the science about it and then try to find folks that have some suggestions or how maybe we can improve it. What can we do? So for me, it started as, I was kind of at my outrage overload with the news and the campaign emails and all these things. And I kind of said, this is just not healthy for me. And I kind of discovered I'm not really alone in it. And so that kind of got me researching this a little bit. And then I said, I think there's room for I think a podcast is a kind of a cool way to explore this a bit. And I'm not an expert. So the whole point is I'm kind of taking listeners on that journey as we go learn this from the experts.
Yeah. So this outrage. I know what of you speak there. I used to be like a big talk radio guy, and I would listen to a lot of that stuff. And then one day I got out of my vehicle and I realized I was the only one in the general vicinity that was ticked off about everything, Right. And so I had to get rid of that. That was just it. They were controlling the way I thought, the way I think, the way I move, the way, all of the things. They would control the interactions I had with other humans. I mean, it just was not healthy. And it sounds like you've kind of been down that same road.
Yeah, from both, sort of the personal side, but also, it also just observing it in others, observing it in society, and all the negative effects at sort of the larger scale and the bigger picture of what's happening with the political polarization and everything else about that. And then also, like you say, on the individual level as well. It's just not good for us to be mad all. You can't be kind of at 10 all the time.
No kidding,
turn
right?
it up to 11.
Yeah. I a friend and I today were talking about just the general atmosphere in the world right now. You've got red, you've got blue, or you've got black, or you've got white. There's no gray, there's no purple, there's no anything anymore. You have to cheer for one team or the other team. And if you're cheering for blue, you hate red. If you're cheering for red, you hate blue. And that's not the way things work. There's middle ground everywhere. We just have to look for it, and we have to be open to it. And unfortunately, that outrage culture does not allow us to do that.
Exactly. I mean, they, whether it's intentional or not, it's been the effect. It's been the result. That we've sort of been telling ourselves our opponents are evil, and they're, no longer are they just sort of the honorable people with a different attitude. They're now evil. Like they're morally wrong. They're morally bad. They need to be punished. Yeah. And we sort of have been telling us that stuff, and now we believe it, right? So we've got ourselves in that mindset. And obviously there's no place for a dialogue or discussion when, you're at that point where you think they're evil. I'm not going to have a conversation with evil. I'm not going to vote for evil. I'm not going to support evil. So, we've got to come out of that. So a lot of this is trying to get people to be more introspective. All of us. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else. So it's all of us trying to learn how to be more introspective. I'm asking people, like, I don't try to change anybody's mind on their politics. I don't really take positions on issues typically. I just talk about the issues themselves and the politics or the science around those politics. I don't take an issue. And I also don't try to change anybody's mind about their issues or their position on these issues. But the thing I'm trying to change people's mind about, if anything, would be that we be more introspective and that we sort of be critical of our own side. It's always super easy to be all over the other side. That's the
Yeah.
easy thing. We do
Yeah.
that. They want us to do that all the time, but
Yeah.
try to be critical of your own side. And that's kind of what drove me to look at it more. It's like I'm getting these emails and things from people that are supposedly on my side. And as you were saying, they're just making me mad all the time. And,
That's right.
they're not really telling me what they're going to do and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's the two things I'm kind of asking people to do is be more introspective, be more, and be a better media, have media literacy and things like that. But the two biggies are be introspective, don't just share that post before you kind of think about it a little bit. It's almost like the angrier it gets, the more you need to slow down rather than the other way around. And likewise, be critical of the stuff that seems to support your position and coming from people that supposedly are on your side. And those things are a little bit hard to do, but I think we'll all be better off for it if we start doing more of that and make space for those. Like you were saying, everything's either black and white, everything's either red or blue. And that's the perception that we live in because we're sort of told that and shown that. And these extreme voices have kind of dominated the landscape. And the reality is, no, the world's purple, the world's gray. And those gray voices and those purple voices just need to come out more, but they sort of self-silence because if you say anything, you're likely to get punished even by your own people because you're not kind of, waving the flag, vigorously enough. And so that's a big piece of it too, that exposing these more moderate, more, middle of the road voices, giving them space.
So a lot of yours, I'm assuming, kind of goes around politics, just simply because that is the world we live in at this point. Are there other issues that maybe don't revolve around politics that you've tackled?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like as you say, the politics are kind of a big one, and they kind of come up a lot because we're kind of in this big political partisanship situation
It
and
never
this political
ends.
divide.
It never ends.
Yeah, so it comes up a lot. But yeah, I mean, you could say this happens on all kinds of places. I mean, I think reality TV is a good
Yeah.
example that
Yeah.
we just, that they just live on this, and maybe, they have, and I think we can get outraged about that. And sometimes some of those kind of things can be not healthy. I mean, obviously sometimes it's entertainment, that's all great, but sometimes it can go beyond. And so there are other spaces, there are other things that affect it. But and so we don't only talk about politics. A lot of it's things like just civility in general,
Yeah.
and how to have civil dialogue, and that's important. And some of it's just the psychology of any complex, I guess you could say something like COVID, but that's become political, so it's hard not to call that political. But
Sure.
but other kinds of places where people have very strong feelings, it's easy to change my mind about something I don't care about very much. Like if I think like an optical illusion or something, if I see this optical illusion and it looks like squiggly lines and I say it's squiggly lines, and some scientist can then come along, or even somebody with a ruler can just come along and show me, look, these lines are straight.
Sure.
I go, yeah, okay, the lines are straight because I don't feel strongly about it. Squiggly lines aren't my thing,
Right.
so I don't really care. But if it's something I care about, you can't change their mind, by fact. So it's when you have those situations like that where you've kind of taken a moral stake in it. You may not even know that you've done that, but you've taken some kind of an emotional or moral stake in it. And now I care about those lines being squiggly. That is very hard to have that conversation, right? So it's any topic like that. And I think there are many. I mean, obviously politics is one of the biggest ones, and politics has been a driver. I do a segment I call Street Outrage, which is like what I call these man on the street interviews, where I talk to how this kind of stuff has affected regular people. And it's so many people have lost, they've got the family member that's sort of become radicalized, or they've had to separate from family members, or friends have separated from them and it's often over politics. So that is a big one. And like I said, some of it's even COVID stuff, which has kind of become political. But yeah, and it's like if we and it's one thing that you sort of separate from somebody you knew in high school and you barely know now, that's one thing. But, when it's a close friend you've had for years, or it's a family member you care about, it's sad that we're in that state, that now we can take this moral high ground and be willing to separate from somebody we love. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. We've got to try to make those connections, see the humanity in people again, and start to make those connections. I mean, one of the guests that I had on, I think, had a great little thing. They said, when you have a situation like that, Ask yourself, would they pull my kid out of a burning car?
Mm.
Obviously, if the answer is no, maybe you don't try to save that relationship. But
That's right. Yeah.
most of the time,
That's safe.
but most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. And so
Sure.
at least start saying, I recognize the humanity in them. And then you can maybe take that to one further step and say, can I think of three things, kind or nice, or, good attributes that I think about that person? Can I think of three good things to say about that person? And you might not find three, but most of the time you can probably find three things good about that person too. And the neuroscience shows that even if you can't find three things good to say about them, which, like I said, you probably will,
Sure.
but even just the searching for three things actually helps you humanize that person.
Wow.
So just things like that can help you start to humanize that person that this media, that's outrage media, all these things, they've told us this person's evil, they're the worst person in the world.
Sure.
But hey, they'd pull my kid out of a burning car, so at least we can start somewhere.
That's maybe a low bar, but it's a bar, right?
It's a low bar, but it's a bar,
That's
it's
right.
somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. So, how often does like the cancel culture phrase come up? I would assume a lot.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's kind of funny that I don't, like I said, I try to be middle of the road and not bring in any of my personal politics. And I also try not to necessarily be supportive one way or the other of other people. But I have noticed in a lot of these conversations that the folks on the right tend to use that language more than the folks on the left.
Really?
And I think it's the same thing. I think the left just has kind of different words for it.
Right.
But
right.
the right seems to be particularly sensitive to that topic. But yeah, it's happening all over. People are canceling whatever word you want to use. Folks, like I said, their own friends, their own good friends, close family members.
That's the thing, right? I mean, I've seen it happen just overnight, and I mean, just people down the street, people online, people wherever, over the smallest things. The things that might be misunderstood. There was a person here in town that we dealt with a lot, that one day we get up and there's a thing on Facebook and everywhere else from our local police where they have arrested like these 8 people, right? He's one of those people in that arrest pool. Well, I hate to break it to everybody, but that doesn't mean he's guilty.
Right.
I mean, we have a society that says innocent until proven guilty. So what if they screwed up? I mean, that's not beyond the pale, I mean, it could have happened.
Right.
But now this poor guy, his face is on Facebook with these other guys with a big headline over the top of it that says criminal something, right? And so everybody just assumes, well, he's a criminal then. We can't associate with him anymore. That man has been excommunicated from this society. I've not seen him since. I've not heard of him since. People do not talk about him. People do not refer to him. It is, it's crazy, honestly, because now I'm starting to hear from a couple of his friends that it might have been mistaken identity kind of thing. So if it is, guess what? The guy's life's still ruined.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff just blows my mind, how quickly we are to assume that things are right or wrong. I think a lot of it stems from like this headline culture that we have of we don't read articles anymore. We just read headlines. There's a great old TV commercial. I say old, it's probably 15 years old. It was for Holiday Inn Express. And there's a lady that is on there and she says, she's talking about, I don't know what it is, something. She goes, I read an article. Well, I read part of an article. And then she goes on to tell you how much she knows about this because she learned it at a Holiday Inn Express, But my friend and I, we used to use that all the time because we were teachers. And so kids are very stern about the fact that they know this and they know this. Well, did you read all of it? Well, no, but I know that, so that would come up a lot. So I'm assuming that is something that you cover as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, these headlines are, half the time, well, you can see how that they tune those headlines as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the headline might have started one place that was pretty close to what the content was, but then they keep tuning it and adding more to it. And pretty soon it's the whole, man bites dog story, right? And that's the whole, if it leads, it bleeds. And a lot of people now kind of recast that as basically if it outrages, it leads, and
that's right.
And that's kind of the short attention span, I think, is a bit of it, but also it's just that competition. There's so much attention seek. There's only so much attention to give, and they want to get, if they figure, and these social media networks, but same with the websites, they want you to stay on that site, they want you to share that
Sure.
content, and we go over that in several research papers about that they've proven that if it has this kind of outrage language and morally indignant language to it, then that will get shared more. So it's a little bit of, we have met the enemy and the enemy is us, because we're the ones doing it. But
Sure.
and so some of it is media literacy and all that. But at some point, these media outfits need to take some responsibility as well, because they obviously know they're doing it. But yeah, absolutely, it's a headline thing.
Yeah. So David, what do you do in real life? You may have already told me, but tell me again.
Yeah, no. I'm basically retired now,
Okay.
primarily retired. I started off in software engineering, and then kind of moved up into management, and so I was in tech for many years,
Okay.
and and then sort of tech management, tech executive, and then also an investor, and worked with VCs in the investment community.
Wow, that's quite a bit of stuff you've done, I would assume. I don't know who you worked for, but it sounds like fairly extensive work. Good sized company.
Well, probably the claim to fame, if there's any, is that I was the CTO for the founding CTO of Earthlink. So
Oh,
we were back in the old dial-up days. So
yeah,
we
I
brought
remember
kind
Earthlink.
of real,
Yeah.
and we brought real internet to sort of regular real people. We basically were sort of
Wow.
the AOL disk of real internet, instead
Yeah.
of a walled garden world.
Yeah.
So yeah, back in those dial-up days.
Wow, good for you. Best I can say is I ran a internet service provider here in town that sponsored a local hockey team, so I got to fire the T-shirt cannon. That's about as far as I got. But
Yeah, that's cool.
so, David,
Yeah, I remember all those ISP days. Those were fun.
Man, I showed up one Monday with my best friend. We both worked there, and we were getting our coffee and everything, and people looked at us and they said, "What are y'all doing here?" I said, "Well, we're getting to work." They said, "Oh no, they fired you on Friday." I said, "Oh great, that's great." So, so how many episodes of this is there in existence?
I just published another bonus episode today. I've only got this is my third actual episode, and then but I've got a couple bonuses, so I've got like fifth out there. I've got a couple more recorded, and those are set to go. And then I've got another like 10 interviews already recorded behind that.
That's great.
So that's where I'm at right now.
How's it going for you? What's the
well?
I guess I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what is like the biggest struggle you've had doing this?
Well, so I expected the biggest struggle, or one of the biggest struggles, to be finding the kind of guests that I wanted, because I'm kind of reaching out. I'm a nobody, and I'm reaching out to well-known scientists and researchers and book authors and things like that. And so far, I've just been fascinated how many people, and so much encouraged by how many folks are coming on again to this show no one's ever heard of, and this guy, talking to this guy that nobody's ever heard of. So that's been great. I've got to have some great guests, and so that no longer is a problem. I'm batting, my batting average there has been good enough. I've been able to find somebody to pretty much talk to every topic that I wanted to talk about. So that part is great. But yeah, the challenge is, of course, one thing that this podcast has reminded me is that I'm not very good at self-promotion, and it's not a thing I'm comfortable with. So it's really reminded me about that. So the promotional side has been a big one. And that's where it's been nice I was just amazed after a couple episodes. The Connors Forum people approached me to bring the podcast under their umbrella and help introduce it and promote it to their network and their connection. So
tell me a little bit more
helpful
about that. What who are these folks, and what do they do?
So Connors Forum is an organization to support democracy, and they're housed out of Shippensburg University out of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And so they have a podcast they call the Utterly Moderate podcast that they talks generally about a lot of stuff. So it's a lot different than my podcast. And then, but they bring on a lot of people, whether it's scientists and authors, but a lot of authors and even media people and celebrities and stuff. And I don't really have a celebrity type
Sure,
podcast, so I don't
sure,
do a lot of
sure.
that.
Yeah.
But then they also have a huge number of resources on media literacy. They have like ratings and rankings of news sources, and go through their whole model of how they rate and select those news sources. So they have a huge number of resources, and it's at connorsforum.org, and they have a huge number of resources for that, and it's really cool. So they're an organization that's trying to promote. It's primarily out of their journalism school, I believe,
Okay.
and it's trying to promote media literacy and support for democracy.
Wow. Wow. That is a big honor then. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Well, that's wonderful. So let me just ask you a couple more questions, and I'll let you get out of here. So a lot of people, I think I can't start a podcast because I need the equipment or I need a place to do it, things like that. Tell me what your setup looks like. What are you using, and how'd you get started?
Yeah, so I spent a bunch of time talking to as many people as I could, and I managed to, and this is another thing about the whole podcast world that I've discovered, is that it seems like there's so many people out there that want to help you out, right? And even so, some fairly big name podcasters were willing to get on a call with me and talk to me about it. So I did a lot of research there, and at the end of the day, there's obviously a wide spectrum of ideas on this. Some people really think you need to go spend $10,000 on equipment.
Sure.
But there's also many, the people that I kind of went with were the ones that go, nah, I've been doing this podcast. I've done 200 episodes or even more, maybe 500 episodes. And they have a successful podcast. They're doing great, and they more or less have like a Blue Yeti mic, and some sound deadening material in their room. So that's kind of the direction I went. I kind of went in this direction that, look, I don't need to spend a lot of money to do this. It's about the content. It's about the material. It's about the scientists and the researchers. And so, so what I'm doing with is I've got this Samson mic, which I think is a $80 mic or something like that. Right. I think I probably spent the most money on the boom arm. I got a good quality boom arm.
Yeah.
It's like $100 or something.
It matters. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and then I've done the same thing on the software side. Excuse me. For right now, I'm just using GarageBand. I probably will have to go to Logic Pro at some point, but I'm just using GarageBand. So I'm pretty much using as much free software as I can.
Yeah.
I use Zoom for my calls.
Yeah.
And the reason why I use Zoom right now is primarily because the folks I'm talking to already know how to use it. And I wanted to keep the bar, the friction as low as possible for guests. There's other technology, so I don't necessarily say Zoom is the absolute best, but Zoom works okay, and it solves my needs. So I use Zoom for the interviews, and and then I have a few other small accounts, but I really bare minimum pretty much. I do probably need to do a little bit more. I do have, sometimes I put up a curtain in the back this room's a little bright, so sometimes I will do that. But yeah, I really think the equipment is secondary. I mean, a decent mic, and a decent computer that can handle which audio isn't that bad. If you're doing video, you need a little bit more horsepower, but if you're doing an audio podcast, it doesn't take that much horsepower to do that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think you should let that get in your way. Obviously, I do care about the editing and all that. So I do spend a lot of time, and I have tried to get better at that. And I'm not a pro, but I do all that myself now because I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to that. So I like to do it all myself. But yeah, you really don't need a lot of equipment. And like I said, I mean, I got a lot of advice from a lot of podcasters, and many of them were on that same page.
That's great. That's great. So last question. So thinking about your podcast, thinking about where it's headed and what you want to do with it, what does success look like for you in this podcast?
Yeah, and it's a question that may continue to evolve. I mean, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah. So one thing I'm giving myself, like you talked about the 8 episodes things. I'm sort of making a commitment that I'm going to stick with this for like a year and a half, because it's, I have history. I mean, I've experienced trying to build out net audiences and things like that. So I know it doesn't just happen unless, you're the 1 in a million lucky person. But in general, it's not easy to build an audience. It's not easy to get that going. And so I'm giving that some time. I don't expect, huge numbers in the first week or anything like that. So I have unrealistic expectations there. And so I know it makes a commitment. And then I'll, kind of make some decisions then. And, and the reality is some of what does it feel like, to be successful kind of already happened, which is like, great. And so things like, getting interviews, being able to have, some people in that whole university academia world kind of respect what I'm doing and be excited about what I'm doing. I mean, that just feels great. I love talking to smart people, and I've had a chance to talk to some great, some really smart people, and so to some extent, I've already had some of that happen. I think the Connors Forum thing was a big hit there, but so from here on out, it's getting better. What does it feel like? It feels like I'll be able to say I've got a reasonably sized audience. I mean, one of my first metrics was if I could say there's 100 people that reached out to me and said, hey, because of the stuff I got from your podcast, I have, I'm not as outraged all the time. I was able to reconnect with the family member. If I have like 100 of those going on, I'll feel pretty good about that, right? And at some point those numbers can be bigger, but that is things like that is kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's very doable. I mean, that's and one thing that you didn't mention, and I'll put you in a group of, I don't know, the last 20 interviews or so, you're probably somewhere between 16, 18 of them. You didn't mention money, and that's amazing, because I think most people think I'm going to get into this podcasting and make a boatload of money. Well, I'm here to tell you that don't happen overnight. It definitely doesn't happen often, and you got to like what you're doing before you're going to make anything off of it. You got to enjoy it. And as long as you're enjoying it, man, that's success to me. I mean, we can go get a job, we can do those things. This is fun stuff. This is stuff that we should care about.
Yeah, I mean, one nice thing about doing an independent podcast like this is I don't have, somebody at that level I have to answer. I mean, I feel for some of the folks that work in a big podcast or promotional, like an NPR or something, where they really have, they have somebody there that's going to be checking those numbers next month. And if those numbers aren't hit, that show's not going to go on. Whereas I don't really have that as an independent, right? I mean, and I think that gives more time to develop the podcast, and also, to bring my own flavor to it more, where I don't have to answer. I mean, I have to answer to my listeners and to myself, and that's about it.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, David, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's wonderful to know you. And I think that your cause and your podcast is something else. I will personally be a listener, just simply because I know whereof you speak, and I know where the subject comes from, and I think we all need to work on it. So one last time, give us your name, the name of your podcast, and where people can find you.
I'm David Beckemeyer, and I host the Outrage Overload podcast, and you can find it at outrageoverload.net, and of course all the major players as well, Apple, Spotify, and all the rest.
That's great. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Michael. Same to you. I'm really glad to make the connection, and I hope we can stay in touch.
Yeah, same here. All right, we'll see you.
All right, take care.
Check out more podcast diaries and plenty of other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. If you have a story to tell, reach out to us. info@roguemedianetwork.com. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.